The spectacular South African cross-country series continued its relentless march through the season with round 4, held at a new venue near the town of Bronkhorstspruit, but with a familiar sponsor back in the event. Atlas Copco is a familiar name when it comes to SACCS, and together with series title sponsors Toyota, Ford and Total Exilium, they brought the dry and dusty Highveld a thundering display of top-flight motorsport. Welcome to round 4 of this year's SACCS, the Atlas Copco 400. For 2018, the race moved to a new venue near the town of Bronkhorstspruit in Gauteng. Within easy reach of both Pretoria and Johannesburg, the event drew masses of spectators, and they certainly weren't disappointed by the action. This, despite the extremely dry and dusty conditions that are typical of the Highveld in midwinter. The DSP and Race HQ was set up in the superb Soetering function venue to the south of Bronkhorstspruit, and the facility served as a perfect base for the Atlas Copco 400. Not only that, but it also gave race sponsors Atlas Copco the perfect place to host their most important guests, Soetering and Atlas Copco, a great combination. Before we get into round 4 of the series, let's take a moment to see how things stacked up after round 3, the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. Remember that the Desert Race offered double points, and as such, the crews at the top of the standings after that grueling event traditionally stand the best chance of going on to take their respective championships. In the production vehicle category, Class FAA is being dominated by Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Chenille de Villiers, with teammate Henk Ladekan in second place, though the latter was 45 points arrears. Fellow Toyota Hilux driver Chris Visser found himself in third place, with Terence Marsh in fourth and Jason Fenter rounding out the top 5. In Class T, Ford NWM's Lance Woolridge held a slender 7-point lead over Malalan Toyota's Johan Horn, with Gary Berthold in third place, Gareth Woolridge in fourth and Henny de Klerk in fifth. De Klerk's only showing thus far in the season was at the Desert Race, where he recorded great results on both days, clearly showing the power of the desert when it comes to championship points. Class S saw David Huddy lead Archie Rutherford by 17 points, with Heini Stumper in third, Jannie Visser in fourth and Elsie Diache in fifth. Over in the specialised category, 4x4 Mega World's Kutsia Labuskakni ruled the roost, though he had John Telford just 9 points behind him. Nick Gosler was in third place overall, but led the Class P championship comfortably. Behind him, Werner Kennedy and Stefan van Pletsen both live Lesotho crews, with quite a bit of work to do in the latter part of the season. But let's get back to Bronkhorstspruit and the 2018 Atlas Copco 400. The weather over the race weekend of the 3rd and 4th of August was crisp and clear, but the lack of rain during the Highveld winter made for plenty of dust. Despite this, the fans and crews were in good spirits and keen to get the racing underway. We caught up with the man at the very top of the pile, Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Chenille de Villiers.
You know, looking at the terrain out here, it's going to be quite fast. Typical Millifield racing. So, our cars are in good condition. We did some tests before this race and, ready to go. And hopefully we can continue with the momentum so far.
Teammate Henk Ladekan knew the roads in the area better than most, having rallied in the area in the past. Not that he thought that would be of much value here at the Atlas Copco 400.
I think the biggest trick here is to get a good qualifying. I don't think you want to be at the back because there will be a lot of dust.
Third in Class FIA after the Desert Race was Atlas Copco's very own Chris Visser, who must have felt at least some pressure to perform well at his sponsor's own event.
I just need a good result, and I need to finish, and I think when we finish today or this weekend, it will be a good weekend for us.
The man at the top of the Class T standings after round 3 was Ford NWM's Lance Woolridge, who had no illusions about the toughness of the task that lay ahead.
So yeah, we're just going to have to get another good result. I think it's going to be a tight race all the way to the end.
If anything, the momentum had swung back towards Malalan Toyota and the crew of Johan and Werner Horn after they bagged a whole bunch of points on the Desert Race. Even so, they were still 7 points adrift of Woolridge going in to the Atlas Copco 400.
Yeah, we had a good run at the Desert. We're back in the fight with the points. We're in Lance with the Fords. We closed with the points. So yeah, we're ready for this.
In the special vehicle category, 4x4 Mega World's Kutsia Laviskachny and his daughter Sandra had an eventful finish at the desert race, having driven more than 50 kilometers with only 3 wheels on their Class A Porter. Still, it gave them the points they needed to stay at the top of the standings.
Yes, now we improved the car's handling dramatically for this race there. You know, we added another wheel into this car, and especially in the right-hand turns there, it's a huge improvement, I can tell you that.
As for Class S, it was David Huddy in the lead, but with Archie Rutherford and Heini Stamfer absent from the Atlas Copco 400, there was only one man that could still catch Huddy in the championship. That man, Jannie Visser.
No, I don't know. The championship is still wide open. We're going to do the race and do our best and see where we stand after the race. And we'll decide on the rest of the season.
Finally, we also caught up with the celebrity navigator doing duty beside Terence Marsh in the Red Line Motorsports, Nis Navarra. Joey Evans is no stranger to racing, but the Para to Dakar legend faced an entirely new prospect at Bronkhorstspruit this year.
So today really is, obviously it's for positioning, but we're not overly fussed about that. It's really just about get a shakedown, understand each other and get into the racing mindset.
And so to the first order of business, sorting out the starting positions for the main race. The qualifying race, as this process is known, started at 2 o'clock on the Friday afternoon. It consisted of a 40-kilometer section of the overall route. The qualifier was many things: short, sharp and very fast, but it certainly wasn't easy. In Class FAA, defending champion Janelle de Villiers, partnered with Dennis Murphy, got his Atlas Copco 400 campaign off to a rocky start after suffering a puncture just 6 kilometers into the race. This pushed him down to 7th in the production category, but the experienced driver still felt positive about his chances.
You know, in the end we lost less time than I thought, so you know, we might eat a bit of dust tomorrow, but it's, you know, I think we're still in for a good chance.
De Villiers wasn't the only one to suffer an upset early on. The Alfa Renault Duster crew of Ramon and Moret Besaideno's prologue came to an abrupt halt when they broke a drive shaft on the start line. While Class S Championship hopefuls, Jannie and Chris Visser decided to throw in their towel after the Toyota Hilux power steering failed early in the qualifier. In the special vehicle category, the spoils went to Stefan van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse in the Liv Lesotho Chenoweth, who recorded a nice clean run, showing an equally clean pair of heels to teammates Werner Kennedy and CJ van Pletsen, who was second fastest in the team's Class A Porter. Jaco Pieterse gave us some insight.
A couple of contours that caught us out, but overall we had a good run and we're hoping for the best tomorrow.
In the production category, Class T honours went to Ford NWM's Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, who had very little to complain about after their qualifying run.
No problem for us. We had a clean run. I think we provisionally first in class, so yeah, very chuffed.
They had the Horn brothers just 11 seconds behind them, with Atlas Copco's Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott a further 16 seconds back, so plenty to keep an eye on in the Class T crews come race day. And in Class FIA, it was Mark Corbett and Jean Moore in 3rd place, making their welcome return. Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Ladeghan and Barry White took second, and the man with the biggest smile on the day was none other than Atlas Copco's very own Chris Visser.
Yeah, it was quite good. You know, we were maybe over anxious in the beginning. Made a couple of wrong slots here and there, but yeah.
The burly Toyota Hilux driver had every reason to be proud of his performance, but even more so thanks to the fact that he has Atlas Copco's very own Phil Herselman in the hot seat, calling the notes. Herselman shared his experience from qualifying and also gave us some insight into Atlas Copco's partnership with the SACCS.
Round 4, the Atlas Copco 400. Excited to be here, new venue. It's the 12th time that we do it, so we're very thankful that we can do it and that we can be part of this. Tomorrow we will have a record number of spectators from Atlas Copco here, staff, customers, stakeholders, dealers. So the pressure is on us now to try and keep the car there, and that's what we really are going to try to do.
And here are the times from qualifying. In Class FIA, it was Visser and Herselman who led Ladeghan and White by 10 seconds, with Corbett and Moore in 3rd. Class T saw Woolridge and Dreyer top the times, 11 seconds ahead of Johan and Werner Horn. Berthold and Minott were in 3rd place. David Huddy and Gerrit Skidder were the only Class S crew to complete the qualifying race. In the special vehicles, Van Pletsen and Pieterse had a healthy buffer over Kennedy and Van Pletsen. with Kutsia and Sandra Labuskakny in third place. Goslar and Lima were the only Class P car to complete the qualifying race. And with that, proceedings at the Soetdering function venue drew to a close, as the dust finally settled over Bronkhorstspruit and day one of the 2018 Atlas Copco 400. Join us off the break as we take you through all the frantic action that followed when the main race got underway.
On Full Custom Garage, Master Metalman Ian Roussel continues the transformation of Jack's wild ride.
At this stage, we've modified everything. When something's this radical, you can't put anything back in its original place. That's the bottom line.
I thought it was going to be good, but it's spectacular. Wow.
The downside is it's quite a bit of work.
As the project gets rolling, things get a little crazy.
The wild card here is the paint job.
You put a little flake on it. Flake doesn't fit on a truck as far as I'm concerned.
With his wheels spinning, Ian goes to see custom car legend Gene Winfield.
I'm dealing with the guy who's got the baddest Econoline pickup on the planet.
If it takes me 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks, doesn't matter. I paint until I like it.
I just started. I'm going to keep going until I'm happy with it.
Welcome back to the 2018 Atlas Copco 400, here in a very dry and dusty Bronkhorstspruit. The crews had a little taster of the dry and dusty winter conditions here on the Highveld during the previous day's qualifying, but around 40 kilometers of qualifying was only the tip of the iceberg. On the cards for race day, 2 loops, each measuring 172 kilometers through open farmlands, rocky outcrops, and burnt fields that left little to no margin for error. Add to this tricky navigation and extremely dusty conditions, and it meant the crews were in for a real treat of ultimate cross-country racing. The teams in their cars weren't the only ones gearing up for action in Bronkhorstspruit. With the town's relative close proximity to Johannesburg and Pretoria, racing fans arrived in their droves to also battle the dust and wind in their quest to quench their appetites for action. Just before 8 a.m., co-driver Philip Hurselman counted the seconds down as the lights turned green. Chris Visser dropped the clutch in his Class FIA Toyota Hilux, and the Atlas Copco 400 was underway. 2 minutes later, he was followed into the unknown by Henk Loddergan and Barry White in the Factory Gazoo Racing Hilux, and the first of the NWM Ford Rangers, piloted by Gareth Woolridge and Navi Boy Dreyer, chased them down as third out the gate. One by one, at exactly 2-minute intervals, the full field of racing cars spread out across various categories set off in their individual quests for racing glory. Spectators were watching the action whilst officials were keeping a close eye on the stopwatch to see what was going on. At the front of the field, Chris Visser and Phil Hurselman had the added pressure of driving an Atlas Copco branded car on the sponsor's home event. Add to that the fact that they had to open the road and find the way. And the Northwest man had a tough task ahead of him, but Visser is a former champion for a very good reason. He was, however, immediately chased down by a Toyota young gun Henk Loddergan and Barry White. Loddergan learned his trade as a teenager on these and similar type roads, so the youngster was determined to show his pace. At the first split, around 40 kilometers into the first loop of the race, Visser was still in the lead, but Loddergan had now moved to within just 5 single seconds of him. He was followed by teammates Chanel de Villiers and Dennis Murphy in the second Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux. De Villiers had already fought his way past the leading Class T car at this early stage, the NWM Ford Ranger of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, which had a lead of around 30 seconds over the Malalon Toyota Hilux, driven by the Horn brothers Johan and Werner. The pace at the front of the field was getting frantic, with several drivers swapping positions as the kilometers were slowly but surely ticking off. Visser was doing his best finding the road whilst trying to stay out front, but he hit a rock near the end of the loop, forcing him to stop and change a flat tyre. Valuable time as well as the overall lead of the Atlas Copco race was now lost.
Yeah, unfortunately we had a flat tyre about 50 k's from the end, and yes, we battled to get the wheel off.
This allowed both the Toyotas of Ladachan and de Villiers to sail past the former race leader, whilst the Horn brothers from Malalan were slowly climbing up the leaderboard and into the lead of Class T. Another crew on the move, obviously fueled by the fact that, as with Visser, they too represented event sponsors Atlas Copco. The Hilux of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott started the loop as the third car in Class T, but quickly moved up into second position behind the Horns. This meant that someone wasn't having the best of luck, and that someone, once again, was Gareth Woolridge, who suffered not one, but two separate punches, all within the first loop of the race. The younger Woolridge also had to concede another position to brother and Class T Championship points leader Lance Woolridge, along with Ward Huxtable, in the hot seat of the second NWM Ford Ranger, despite dealing with a flat tyre of their own. At the front of the special vehicle field, pole setters Stefan Van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse in the Liv Lesotho Chenoweth were maintaining a slight advantage over John Telford and Victor Nsheki, who managed to climb from fourth at the start to second in class near the end of Loop 1. Telford was sitting ahead of Zahir and Lays Badanya and the second Liv Lesotho car, driven by Werner Kennedy and CJ Van Pletsen. Kennedy picked up a puncher and stopped to change the flat tyre, only to find that the car's jack was missing out on the route. But Good Samaritans and championship points leaders, Kutsia and daughter Sandra Labuskakny, were quick to lend a helping hand. The miles were ticking off and going got really dusty as the leading crews were starting to race their way back into the designated service park on the outskirts of Bronkhorstspruit for the end of the first loop of racing. If we counted them down, it was the Zarco Magnum of Nick Gosler and Joe Lima who reached the DSP as the leading Class P special vehicle, comfortably leading ahead of the CR2, driven by Guy Henley and Hein Moore. Stefan Van Pletsen managed to hang on to his Class A lead after successfully completing the first of two loops of the race. Van Pletsen's advantage over current second-place man John Telford was a comfortable 3 minutes, with the Jimco of the Badanyas completing the virtual podium at the halfway mark, whilst others such as John Thompson and Marisa Matten failed to finish courtesy of a broken gearbox. Scott Berger's return to cross-country racing also didn't last long, as he was forced to retire with a series of back-to-back punches. In Class S, David Huddy and the experienced Gerard Skidder were keeping their noses clean at the front of their class, putting a healthy gap between them and the Fissers in their Toyota Hilux. At the same time, several of the Class T competitors were now running into problems. The Brazilian pairing of Marcus Boomgaard and Clever Cincia in the third of the NWM Ford Rangers were struggling with navigation in the unfamiliar terrain and found themselves way down the order, behind the rapid BMW X3 of Richard Leek and Donnie Stassen, who was slowed by some niggling technical issues. Reaching the service park in fifth position in Class T was the Ford Ranger of Jacques Van Tonder and Sammy Redlinghuis. They were around 5 minutes slower than the fourth-placed pairing of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer. Older brother Lance managed to reach the halfway marker in a provisional podium spot, just 52 seconds behind the Atlas Copco pairing of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott. This despite having some major problems on Loop 1.
Hats off to Jeff, he did a fantastic job. We still managed to come through in second through the treacherous conditions without a GPS.
This meant that the Malalan Toyota put its new engine to good use by reaching the halfway mark of the race in the virtual lead of Class T.
It's fast, a lot of rocks. We had an incident with a rock, luckily the car didn't break.
At the very front of the field, the expected battle raged on between Ladachan, Visser and de Villiers, with the Dakar legend de Villiers managing to squeeze past his teammate Ladachan right near the end of the loop to take the lead in Class FAA and lead the race overall. They were followed by the Alfa Renault Duster of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson and the Century Racing CR6 of Mark Corbett and Jean Moore, along with the Redline Motorsport Racing Nissan Navara of Terence Marsh and celebrity navigator Joey Evans. They also reached the safety of the DSP in Bronkhorstspruit. And then it happened. A loose wire on the tracking device inside the CR5 of Brian Baragwanath and co-driver Leonard Kramer meant it was difficult to follow the pairing's progress until they actually crossed the finish line. Their total time of 2 hours 35 minutes and 23 seconds meant that Baragwanath was the surprise overall leader of the event at this stage.
Oh, so far so good. Car's going well. It's good for this terrain. Century Racing cars are always good in this fast stuff, so let's see what we can do.
So that's the story so far. Chris Visser was the early leader but dropped a few spots due to punctures. Henk Lauderkan found the going tough, but will start the second loop from third overall on the leaderboard. Baragwanath displayed his raw talent by currently leading, but he will now have a former Dakar winner chasing him down.
I'm quite surprised that he went so quick. Yeah, obviously did a good job, but we can catch him. So if we have a clean run, we can do it.
Loop 2 had all the makings of being epic, so join us after the break for the conclusion of the action-packed Atlas Copco 400. Round 5 of the Championship Racing Series takes us to the KMIA, based at the Kruger International Airport. For round 5 of the series, points are getting pretty tasty and tight from now on in, and everyone is battling for whatever is left on the plate. Always going to be a popular series and events to boot. Seniors, juniors, and all in between coming to race in this incredible part of the country. In the pits, everyone was getting nice and ready and prepping some brand new kit as well. It's always that time of year where people get box fresh. Welcome back to Bronkhorstspruit, where another 170 kilometers of dust and mayhem awaits the crews. And after 20 minutes in the service park, followed by a quick regroup, it was back into the fray. And the loop had hardly started when it delivered its first upset. Race leader Brian Baragwanath made contact with a slower competitor in the choking dust and was forced to retire his Class FIA CR5 buggy. It was a very disappointing end to an extremely well-run race, and Baragwanath will certainly be a competitor to watch in the future. This promoted Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Lauderkan and Barry White to the overall lead of the event, though the Hilux pairing didn't have it all their own way. Teammates De Villiers and Murphy pushed hard in the second loop, keeping them honest throughout. But a malfunctioning belt tensioner put pay to De Villiers' charge just 70 kilometers from the finish, handing the Dakar legend his first DNF of the season.
Unfortunately, we had a mechanical problem. We had a belt tensioner break on the engine, and that meant that we couldn't keep the fan belt on. So that was basically that.
With De Villiers out of the equation, it was the Alfa Renault Duster crew of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson who brought their Class FIA Renault home in third place. It was a great return to form for the crew, who had featured on the podium many times in the past. Ahead of them, Chris Visser and Phil Herselman gave event sponsors Atlas Copco every reason to smile when they brought home their Class FIA Toyota Hilux in second place. A stunning performance by the resurgent Visser.
I must say for our team, thank you very much for Atlas Copco. It's our event, and yeah, very glad to finish second.
This meant that the overall and Class FIA victory went to Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Lauderkan and White. A maiden SACCS victory for the pair, though some might argue that winning day one of the desert would also count as a win. Be that as it may, it was a great result for the youngster, and he was understandably overjoyed.
When we started last year, started with the off-roads, we knew it was going to be difficult. But yes, this is really an experienced sport. We've come close, or we've had moments where we thought, okay, now we're going well, and then something happens, or you don't account for something. So it feels awesome being at the finish and finally winning a race.
And here's confirmation of Lauderkan and White's triumph, with Visser and Herselman in second and Van Staden and Lawrenson in third place. Terence Marsh and Joey Evans had a great run to bring their Nissan home in fourth place. The battle for supremacy in Class T was a hairy one, with the Horn brothers desperate for a good result in order to get back into championship contention. The Malalan Toyota crew pushed extremely hard throughout the loop and managed to bring their car home in the second fastest time of the race. This would have been a great result had they not incurred a penalty for checking in late at the start of the event, and as a result, they were demoted to third place.
But yeah, a good result for us. Points. I think we're closer to Lance now. That's all that counts. So let's see the next 2 races.
One man's demotion is another man's promotion, and the horns penalty played nicely into the hands of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, who then moved up into second place in their Ford NWM Ranger. Woolridge and Dreyer had a great race, and peg in second place was a triumph for the young driver after a rough season so far. This meant that Class T victory at the Atlas Copco 400 went to none other than Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott in their Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux. What a journey it's been for Berthold, having lost his brand new VW Amarok at last year's desert race, all the way to the top step of the podium at his home sponsored event in 2018. And if Atlas Copco had reason to smile at Chris Visser's second place overall, then they had plenty to be ecstatic about, as Berthold took the win, and Berthold himself seemed pretty chuffed.
Oh, fantastic to be at the Atlas Copco 400 and get a winning streak that's come through finally. I've waited a long time, but that Atlas Copco Hilux certainly kept us going today.
Class S saw David Huddy and Gerrit Skidder take the victory in their Nissan Navara, well ahead of the Toyota Hilux of Yanni and Chris Visser, further stretching their lead at the top of the standings. Rory Eland and Robbie Coetzee completed the Class S podium in their ex-Richard Leake Ford Ranger. And here it is, the result that Atlas Copco had so dearly hoped for. Berthold and Minott taking the Class T honours by 53 seconds. Woolridge and Dreyer finishing in second, with the horns demoted to third. Woolridge and Huxtable were fourth fastest, with the Brazilian crew of Boomgod and Cincia rounding out the top 5. In the specials, Loop 2 proved to be somewhat more straightforward for most of the crews than was the case in Loop 1. Nick Gosler and Joe Lima were the only Class P entry to complete the race, scoring maximum points once again in the process. But in the Class A battle, championship hopefuls Coetzee and Sandra Labuschagne in the 4x4 Mega World Porter would have hoped for more than a fourth place that they begged. The culprit this time around, fuel starvation along with braking problems that slowed them down. But points for fourth are still better than no points at all. They were beaten to the post by the Liv Lesotho Porter crew of Kennedy and Van Pletsen, who came home 1 minute and 32 seconds ahead of the Labuschagnes to claim a solid third place. Big John Telford and Victor Nsheki put in a solid performance to bag second place in their Bat Warbird. But the men of the moment were Stefan Van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse. These guys drove a fantastic race to take the victory in Bronkhorstspruit, flying the flag high and proud for Liv Lesotho in the process. This opens up the Class A Championship once again, and the lads had every reason to be proud of their run.
Yeah, it went well. We expected a bit poor, but it was very well. A lot of dust, but everything good.
And here it is then, the official results for the special vehicle category. In Class A, it was Van Pletsen and Pieterse ahead of Telford and Nsheki. Kennedy and Van Pletsen completed the podium, with Gosler and Lima the only Class P crew to make it home. 3 interprovincial side-by-side crews also took the starters' orders at the Atlas Copco 400. These compact machines are truly spectacular to watch and often post really quick times. In Bronkhorstspruit, however, the G46 Can-Am of Nico Durant and JG Klaassen failed to start the race due to transmission problems that they picked up during the qualifying event. Side-by-side regulars Vernon Mostert and Rob Green in the G247 Can-Am had to settle for second place this time around, some 43 minutes adrift after a torrid race. Mostert and Green qualified well, first in class and 14th overall, but a flat tyre, mechanical problems and an errant piece of fence that got caught in their front wheel of their steed conspired to scupper their charge. The spoils in the end went to newcomers Ernest Roberts and Stuart Creevy in their G7 Can-Am Maverick, and this during their first national cross-country race ever. If you haven't seen Sideys, as they're also known, in action yet, be sure to make a plan to catch them at our next round of events. And that wraps up our coverage of the 2018 Atlas Copco 400, an almost unexpected gem of a race that saw plenty of thrills and spills despite the dry and dusty winter conditions of the Highveld. It was an event that will be remembered for a long time by many competitors, but none more so than Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Laterkan and Barry White, who finally cracked the top step of the podium. Next up for the SACCS is Round 5, the Harry Smith 400, which is set for the 14th and 15th of September. We'll see you guys out there. All the action from the Atlas Copco 400 was brought to you by Toyota, Ford and Total Exilium.